Good day everyone. I'm David, moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Payroll Documentation and How to Build a Good SOP. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Dana J. Rium. Dana is currently the Director of Payroll Operations at Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. Dana has been heavily involved in the payroll field for over 17 years. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Dana.
Thank you, and welcome to Payroll Process Documentation Best Practices. So first, let's talk about what we are going to review today. So first, we're going to understand the current process. It's very important to make sure that you're doing that and that you're doing that appropriately. So definitely want to make sure that we do that from an understanding current process perspective. So we'll talk through goal trees. What are they? Why are they so important? We'll do brainstorming tools. So what are some tools that you can use to assist in some of these things? And then we'll talk about project plans. Then we'll talk about different types of documentation. So one is process documentation from a process map workflow perspective. Some best practices around process mapping and those kinds of things I will review with you. And then I like to go over some potential ways to put together your own template of process documentation. What should your documentation include? What should your documentation not include? All of those things are extremely key. So do want to make sure that you have visibility to that and what you can be doing to do the right thing from a perspective of the making sure you've got good documentation for the work that you need. All right, so understanding the current process. So from a goal tree perspective. Now, once you know where you're going and where the organization is going, then you start thinking about, okay, how do I look at my current processes and make sure that they're in alignment with where the organization is going. So here is the goal tree. It's kind of a picture view of it. Again, it should be in alignment, right? So as an organization, you should make sure that you're aligning to the work here and making sure that things are moving forward. All right, so let's talk about some of these brainstorming tools that will be so beneficial to you. You know, a thought process map is really, it helps you identify questions. So what are the problems and the issues? Don't get stuck on answering the questions. You can begin to start to say, hey, what do we know about some of the answers to the questions? You know, critical from a thought process map perspective. The next one I like, and I use this one in many different aspects, is the affinity diagram. This method is good for a conference room setting. Now, project plans. I'm not going to spend too much time on project plans, but again, do want to make sure from a timeline perspective for all phases of the project. All right, let's start talking about your documentation. So one key thing from a documentation perspective is your workflow charts. So workflow or process maps. So there's two portions here that I like to remind you of about these process maps and workflow charts. So a workflow map is exactly what it is called. It is just showing you the steps of a process. Now, what does a workflow map look like? This is what a workflow map looks like. Now, what is the value of defining or doing a process map? All right, so here is the different classifications that you put to your inputs. There's 4 different classifications. One is noise. Output, you know, then your controls. These are critical. Standard operating procedures. Standard operating procedures, these are inputs that are part of the process step. Critical factors, these are, okay, I have to have this to get this right. Process map shapes, this is very important. Some key things on here, obviously process step, end of a process, on and off page reference. That is very important. Key ones here that I do really like to push people on is one, the decision. Document your decisions. Now here is your process map. There are different types of process maps, so that is important to understand. A wall map, or actually we'll start with the top level map. So the top level map doesn't make it as easy to do your analysis. This can be used a lot of times because you have these big main steps, but a lot of sub steps. A functional map, This I find extremely beneficial. Let's talk more about, hey, Dana, I want to make my own template. I don't want to do a process map. Maybe I just want to have written documentation. So essential components to a written documentation. All right, some key things that you want to include in your documentation. Never use personal names. Make sure you're descriptive. When writing the process, think of what parts of the process take a lot of time. And again, always be thinking to ensure that all federal, state, and local laws that drive a process are included. When deciding what processes to document, think about everything you do in a day and make a list of all those things and document all of them. Now, once the documentation is completed, make sure you do what I call walk the process. Process documentation is a vital part of a smooth running business these days. Also, how do you validate your process? There are two different types of data that you can collect. Variable data, which is a count of the results of the process. Attribute data is a count of the number of defective results of the process. You can use these two pieces of data against each other as appropriate. Now, in the handout, I give you data collection tools. These data collection tools are ones that you can use, obviously pie charts. This will really help you see, right? It's a picture view. Hey, why does employee 5 have so many more term checks? Pareto charts, again, you can clearly see here most of the manuals are for term payouts, but then your next big bet would be status changes or late. Run charts, then you start to see the trends. Scatter plot also gives you a real good sense of what relationships exist as well. So validating the process, again, you walk the process, the owner versus the processor. Do it more than once. If you're making changes, always do a dry run. So thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Again, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. I hope you found it a really good use of your time. And I want to say thank you very much and that I wish you all a really great day.
Thank you, Dana. That was a wonderful webinar. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And you all may disconnect now. You all have a great day ahead. Bye-bye. Take care.